The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. California legislators have approved a more than $7 billion COVID relief package, including $600 stimulus checks. And that money could arrive as soon as a month after filing tax returns. This is a California-based COVID relief bill, totally separate from the federal COVID relief bill that's currently being considered, evaluated, and discussed by Joe Biden, Democrats, and Republicans. Governor Gavin Newsom and legislative leaders put it together last week. It includes more than $2 billion in grants and fee waivers for small businesses. Businesses will soon be able to apply for the grants, and there will be an approval process expected to take 45 days. There will be an additional $2 billion in tax breaks for businesses, which would bring the package all the way up to almost $10 billion. And then the stimulus assistance for people earning under $30,000 a year will come 4 to 5 weeks after they file their 2020 tax returns. This is very interesting, Pat, for a few different reasons. One, that it's not been much discussed that throughout this pandemic, states can also do their own stimulus. Now, a lot of states can't really afford it and are sort of reliant on the federal government anyway if they want to do something like this, which is, I think, part of the reason why many states haven't gone forward. California's budget problems are widely known, and yet they are pushing forward with this. And I think that it's going to be a very welcome relief to many Californians.
Yeah, I think it's a good decision. Of course, the federal government can print as much money as it wants, whereas state governments can't do that. And that's why you sometimes run into these problems. And that's why it's often seen as the federal government's responsibility to provide stimulus. But states can do it too. And they actually had this extra money because they were expecting to have less revenue come into the state last year.
Right.
They thought that unemployment would be higher. And they also didn't expect the stock market to do as well as it did last year. And so that means that they got a lot of extra money off of capital gains taxes from some of the richest people who live in California. And this is a great way to, I think, redistribute wealth. I mean, the people who qualify for these stimulus checks, by and large, are making under 30 grand a year. And, that money is coming from people who probably made a fortune off of Wall Street over the past year. So I like to see it, and it seems like a good move to me.
What do you think is going on right now with the federal stimulus bill from the standpoint of, is Joe Biden specifically waiting for something? And if so, what is he waiting for? I think at this point, he's waited long enough to see if Republicans are willing to get on board and help. I just don't understand at this point what he's waiting for.
From what I saw a few days ago, it's just going through procedural hurdles right now because the bill passed the House, has to go to the Senate, and then the Senate parliamentarian has to take a look at it and see, is this the type of thing that we can even pass through budget reconciliation, or does it have to be its own standalone bill? They have to work out the provisions like the $15 minimum wage. Of course, the House and the Senate have to pass the exact same version of the bill. So it's just one of those things where Washington takes time to pass things, but I think that we can expect to see that passed in the next couple of weeks and then signed into law thereafter. I think Biden's mistake with all this was to say that he would be able to get it done in his first week or so.
Right.
They probably knew at that time that it wasn't true, but hopefully it comes sooner than later.
Let's hope so, because even with the timeline you're suggesting, which is passage in a couple of weeks, getting signed into law, we're likely looking at April or even May for people getting checks. I mean, that's just how long this has been taking when we looked at the past packages. And that is, I mean, listen, I hope things are dramatically better at that point in time. But for a lot of people, that's just not an acceptable amount of time to wait.
Right. So then you'd be getting a stimulus payment in May of 2020, a stimulus payment in April of 2021, and just like the $600 in between those two. Clearly, that's not enough. And yes, the government has been dragging its feet on this. But I would hope that this is like the last one we have to negotiate and pass, and soon enough we'll be able to get back on our feet as a country and hopefully be able to move beyond stimulus, but it could take some time.
One of the things that is increasingly also a problem for Joe Biden is the confirmation of Neera Tanden. That's Joe Biden's selection to run the Office of Management and Budget, also known as OMB. Now, from day one, I have said that this is Joe Biden's worst nomination. Neera Tanden is from the Center for American Progress wing of the Democratic Party, really a sort of Democratic establishment insider. I don't care about her mean tweets about Bernie Sanders. That's become an issue. Joe Manchin, who is one of 50 Democratic senators, has said that he will not be supporting her because some of the things that she has previously said. But yet Joe Manchin voted to approve Brett Kavanaugh, despite the things that Brett Kavanaugh previously did and said. So the reasoning that Joe Manchin is giving, I find to be a very unmotivating and unconvincing. But I don't think people like Neera Tanden should have any role to play in an administration that I want to have as far removed from these sort of establishment democratic institutions as possible. And as competent as you can say Neera Tanden is, I thought that she was exactly what we don't need in a Biden administration. Her nomination really may now be in trouble because without Joe Manchin, not only do Democrats need every remaining Democrat, all 49, they also now need one Republican. And so far, we've learned that Mitt Romney is not going to support the nomination of Neera Tanden. Susan Collins is not going to support the confirmation of Neera Tanden. This is increasingly an uphill battle, Pat, even though for now Joe Biden has continued to say, I think we're going to find the votes. They may not actually find the votes for Neera Tanden, which I think would be a good thing.
I wonder if Bernie Sanders will vote to confirm her too, because a lot of those tweets went after Bernie Sanders specifically.
Right.
My thought is Bernie tends to be a team player, so because Joe Biden wants Neera Tanden as his officer of management and budget, he may just decide to go along with it and vote for her. But we'll have to see what happens here. We've talked a lot about how Joe Manchin is going to be a thorn in our side over these next 2 years. We've been saying that ever since we won those 2 seats in Georgia.
Yeah.
If this is the issue that he wants to blow off steam on, if this is the one that he wants to pick, go for it. Let it out of your system now, Joe Manchin, so then we can pass things like COVID relief and some of the other things we want to pass in these next 2 years. Get it all done with Neera Tanden here.
I tweeted the other day, this is the most interesting thing Joe Manchin has ever done as far as I'm concerned, although he's doing it for reasons that I find to be very weak. Now, one other note on this. You can start to see that the perspective on this within the White House is shifting a little bit, because in yesterday's press briefing, when Joe Biden's White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, was asked about Neera Tanden, she said Joe Biden wouldn't have picked her if he didn't think she could do the job, which is a shift from we believe we have the votes to Joe Biden believes she can do the job if confirmed, which is what we don't know. So I know it's a small shift, Pat, but that is a shift in language about Neera Tanden.
That's an interesting statement, because I think it goes without saying, right? If you didn't think that she could do the job, you wouldn't have nominated her to begin with. But it does sound like now they're starting to recognize that they may not have the votes. And how funny is it that Republicans are opposing her because of her mean tweets? I mean, really,
it's
the past
pathetic.
4 years of Trump, they claim to not have seen those tweets
right.
that Trump sent out. They didn't see them. They didn't have a chance to catch those tweets. But now all of a sudden they are very much up to date with what Neera Tanden has said.
They know all of her tweets over the last 8 years, although they didn't hear. Kelly Loeffler didn't hear about grabbing by the pussy. But I'm sure if she were still in the Senate, she'd be saying, oh, those tweets are very concerning, just like Susan Collins is saying. Hey, here's a Bitcoin story. Last week, Bitcoin had another major run up. And then on Monday, things cooled off with Bitcoin. Elon Musk saying he thinks it's too high, but also Joe Biden's Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, warning that Bitcoin is a, quote, extremely inefficient way to conduct monetary transactions. And Bitcoin prices tumbled, arguably only partially because of what Janet Yellen said. We don't know what the future of Bitcoin is. I think at this point, Pat, whatever Neera Yellen says, and whatever Neera Tanden says, but whatever Janet Yellen says or whatever, when you start to see hedge funds, companies like Tesla, and so many others say, hey, you know what? We're going to put 1% of our assets in Bitcoin as a hedge. We're going to accept Bitcoin as payment. I think the idea at this point of Bitcoin going away is a fantasy idea. Now, will it be worth 10,000 a coin or 50,000 a coin or 100,000 or a million a coin, as some are saying? I don't pretend to know. I have no idea. But at this point, I don't think it's going away.
Yeah, I mean, the price goes all over the place, and you could tell me that within the next week it'll lose half of its value, and I would believe you. You could tell me that within the next week it'll double its value, and I would also believe you. So it's not the safest investment for sure, but people like to put a little bit of money into it. Now we're starting to see companies do the same thing. I think the big risk with Bitcoin is governments around the world deciding to try to shut it down. And of course, Bitcoin proponents will say, well, it's decentralized, so they couldn't even do it if they wanted to. But I wonder if like the U.S. government decided to make this like full-throated, full-fledged attack on Bitcoin, if they would be able to go after them successfully, because, you know, with the possibilities of being able to commit financial crimes and, you know, have these purchases not being tracked, the possibility of not having to pay taxes on transactions, that sort of thing, maybe the U.S. government would feel that it's right to go after it, and maybe that would tank the price. We just don't know.
I think that the path for the U.S. government to attack Bitcoin would be, one, creating law where gains on Bitcoin are taxed at a separate and absurdly high rate. Now, of course, what that will cause is people to simply lie or to try to just simply not declare their Bitcoin holdings or whatever the case may be. And also going after and trying to prevent exchanges from operating in the United States, because I really don't see how you shut Bitcoin down. It's a protocol, after all. But I do see ways that a determined U.S. federal government could really make it a pain in the ass to deal with Bitcoin. I don't know if they're determined to do it, however.
Yeah, I don't know if the Biden administration would want to go after it, especially because I think people are really coming around to Bitcoin now, and you know, it's becoming more and more popular. I think
adoption is happening.
Opposed to it. Yeah, and people want a diverse amount of currency. They want to be able to like hedge their bets and be able to invest in the stock market and a little bit of crypto and gold and all of these different things. And so, yeah, it's going to be tough to reverse course at this point, especially with Bitcoin being around $50,000 a coin at this point. But we'll have to see. It is crazy too how Elon Musk can just make a statement and the price of Bitcoin will soar or tank, or Janet Yellen can come out with a statement and the same thing will happen. I mean, it does seem really flimsy in that regard. It's
quite volatile in that sense. But if anyone who's been in it, you know, for any period of time has obviously made a lot of money, even with, you know, the dips this week, it's still up so much. I've said before on streams, on January 1st, I sold 15% of my Bitcoin to lock in some gains. And it basically doubled since then. Now, I don't regret it. I took gains off the table, went back to US dollars and was able to put that money away. But I'm not in it because I pretend to know where it's going. I'm in it because I'm interested enough to have some portion of my money in more speculative assets, an amount I can afford to lose, certainly. And that's it. And otherwise, I'm just waiting it out.
Seems like there's a lot of Bitcoin pumpers at this point, right?
Oh, yeah.
People who want to see it go up to $1 million a coin, which it very well could. I mean, it may take a few years before something like that happens. But yeah, there are really a lot of people who want to push this thing up.
No question whatsoever. And we will see what happens in the coming weeks. And March, historically, a bad month for Bitcoin, but it hasn't been around that long that we can necessarily say that it's a pattern. It's happened to be that way. Since Bitcoin has been around. I make no predictions. I have no expectations, and I am curious to follow it and to see what happens. We will be back tomorrow with, number one, a new show, and number two, also a new bonus show. I will see you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.